The Russia versus Ukraine war is about a lot of things, but for the 1% of the world and bankers, it's about making money. I'm going to let you watch this clip, and then I'm going to explain to you why billionaires are really planning on cleaning up because of this war. As Warren Buffett has said, you buy when there's blood in the street. And I'm going to explain to you why that is so important to think about when you're watching the news clips of this war that's going on. So here's one we want you to watch, and then I'm going to explain to you a few things afterwards.
You've seen the situation in Ukraine. You've seen how the world is responding. Now let me show you how the world is covering this invasion. I'm talking about the media, especially Western channels. How are they covering Russia's invasion? With blatant racism. Let me say something at the outset. As journalists, we do not filter hardships and pain. We do not see caste, color, or gender. And we have stuck by this principle. When the Taliban stormed Kabul, we stood with Afghans. When Ethiopia attacked its own people, we questioned them. When unarmed black teenagers were gunned down in the US, we joined the outrage. Today, we are doing the same. We see the plight of the Ukrainian people, and we have reported on their hardships. But what about the Western media? They too are reporting on the crisis, on the war, on the refugees. But they do not see hardships. They only see race, the color of your skin, the color of your hair. Let me show you exhibit number 1. This exchange happened on the BBC, the so-called guardian of unbiased reportage. Listen to how their panel describes the refugees from Ukraine.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed.
People with blue eyes and blonde hair. That is why the so-called expert on the BBC is emotional, not because the people are homeless, not because their country is being invaded, but because their hair is blonde. On social media, a lot of people are defending the BBC. They say it's a guest, not their anchor. Let me take you back to September last year. Another guest was speaking on the very same channel, South Asian expert Christine Fair. She called out Pakistan's links with the Taliban. Do you remember what the BBC presenter did? She shut her down. She said it was violating the channel's unbiased coverage. So exposing terror links is a violation. Blatant racism and white supremacy is fine. Gold standard indeed. Now for exhibit number 2, NBC News from the US. Listen to this.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar.
Very similar to us. How so? Because the Syrian refugees are Muslims, their skin is darker, their hair is not blonde. So Europe does not want them. And remember, this is not being said at some white supremacy cult. This is happening on live television. Exhibit number 3, CBS News, another American broadcaster. Their reporter is appalled by the war, not because there is death and destruction, but because it is happening in Europe.
Like Iraq or Afghanistan, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
So Iraq and Afghanistan are uncivilized countries. Their people are uncultured. Their regimes are irresponsible. So they deserve war. They deserve hundreds of bombs and years of occupation. What about Ukraine? According to CBS, no. Ukraine does not deserve war or hardships because Ukraine is civilized. And now for the final exhibit. This one is not from the West. It is from Al Jazeera in Qatar. This anchor simply cannot comprehend the idea of European refugees.
What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
That reporter is confused about the refugees. They look middle class, they look like Europeans. How is something so bad happening to them? Well, this is what systemic racism looks like. Do you remember the 2015 refugee crisis? Around 1.3 million people sought asylum in Europe. Most of them were from Syria, Afghanistan and Nigeria. Do you remember how the West reacted? They shut their borders, they herded the refugees like cattle, and they branded them as terrorists. Back then, Western reportage was quite different. Let me show you what the BBC did. They prepared 7 charts depicting the refugee crisis. Let's focus on chart number 5. Which European countries are most affected? Now remember, this war was in West Asia. The bombs were dropping on West Asia, but this was the BBC's big concern. Which European countries are most affected? Now, just to be clear, we welcome what Europe is doing to host Ukrainian refugees. They deserve all the help. Our question is, why just Ukraine? Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. It is not part of NATO. So what explains this level of assistance? Racism. You see, Ukrainians are Europeans. Hence, they get the red carpet. But Africans and Asians get border crackdowns and refugee camps. Western media is part of the problem, I have to say. They reflect the public mentality, their sense of European supremacy. And the problem is, governments are not doing anything to help. In fact, they're adding fuel to this fire. Let me show you what Bulgaria's Prime Minister said about refugees. I'm quoting. These people are intelligent. They're educated people. This is not the refugee wave we have been used to. People we were not sure about their identity. People with unclear pasts who could have been even terrorists. That was a European head of state. He is openly calling West Asian refugees terrorists. If this does not expose Western hypocrisy, nothing does. They invaded Asian and African countries. They waged war. They committed war crimes. And when the people fled, they shut their borders. What does this tell you? That refugees were never the problem. That money or borders were not the issue. The issue was race. Think about it. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
Okay, so the idea behind this video is I wanted you to see what I've been learning and understanding. What rich people are trying to explain to you, or what a billionaire has been talking about, is this one thing, is that Russia, the Ukraine, they are European countries. And even if Ukraine gets the crap bombed out of it and Russia gets the crap bombed out of it, at the end of the day, they will reestablish these economies. So right now, even though the ruble is literally less than a penny at the time of this recording, they will reestablish the ruble. They will rebuild the Russian companies that were destroyed. They will rebuild the Ukrainian cities that were destroyed. They will create a Marshall Plan so that these European cities will be made whole. That's what Europeans will do, including the United States, for Europeans. So, the reason that I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say next is because this can change your life dramatically. If the ruble is at 1 cent or less than 1 cent right now, and you were to buy it, and let's say that in 6 months, the war is over, peace has been brought to Ukraine and to Russia, they're going to start pushing that ruble up from that 1 cent back towards the 83 cent mark. Remember, right before this war started, the ruble was at 83 cents to the dollar. Now it's at 1 cent to the dollar. If you were to buy it right now, you would definitely be in the win column. So if I'm not mistaken, the math is something like for $1,000 invested, you would end up with 100,000 rubles. So $1,000, 100,000 rubles. If it goes back to the 83 cent mark, that's 83,000 rubles. So what I want you to do is consider that. Even the companies, if you look on TD Ameritrade or any place else, or just Google it, you'll see that there's a ton of Russian companies that have been beaten down. And if I was reading this morning and it said that most Russian companies that trade on New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, what have you, have now become penny stocks. Remember this, they are not going to stay penny stocks. The Gazprom, or whatever it's called, the Russian company, their fuel company, it's not going to stay a penny stock. It will find its value again when all of this is over. So you need to consider how important it is for you to start buying these penny stocks that are, or stocks that are now made into penny stocks, as well as how to start buying and learn. Don't just go out and start buying, but learn first how to make the proper investments, how to buy FOREX, which is simply currency exchange. So I want to give you some material that I believe is powerful. All you have to do is look in the description, and I'm giving you 2 links. One for FOREX, so you can learn how to do that properly, which is the indicator software and information, and then another one for stock purchases. You really need to consider that, because this can change your life. Billionaires and the banks are buying these assets like they're going out of style, like they just, you know, it's the thing to do. I'm just telling you. And just think about it, like I said earlier, if it's worth a penny now, the country of Russia is not going to go away. It has to be worth something far greater than a penny when all of this is said and done. The same thing for the Ukraine's money, the same thing for Poland and all the bordering countries. Just keep that in mind. And if you're interested, I've put some information in the link below, programs that I think you should be interested in buying. I believe it will help you, as I know it will help me to have a better, brighter future. Let's start doing the same thing that the rich people are doing so we can get ahead as well. Thank you for your time. Look in the description, and the links are there for the programs I just told you about. Thanks.